A millionaire froze when he saw the flower seller. The woman was identical to his childhood love. He thought she had died in an accident 20 years ago. The millionaire needed to gather courage to talk to her. Before you hear this emotional story, remember to subscribe to the channel. The late afternoon sun bathed the central square of New York City with a golden light, creating a surreal contrast between the glass skyscrapers and the century-old trees that bravely resisted the advance of concrete. Among the hurried crowd, crossing the place, the figure of a tall man with an elegant bearing wearing an impeccable suit stood out. Richard Anderson, 55 years old, was the living portrait of business success, but his brown eyes, despite the glimmer of determination, carried a shadow of melancholy that not all the money in the world seemed capable of erasing. He walked with firm steps, like someone in a hurry to get nowhere when something or someone made him stop abruptly. There, a few meters away, a woman was selling flowers. It wasn't the unusual scene that surprised him, but the face of the vendor. A face he knew better than his own, a face that had haunted him for more than 2 decades in dreams and nightmares. "It can't be," he muttered to himself, feeling his heart race as it hadn't in a long time. The woman, appearing to be about 50 years old, had wavy brown hair framing a face with delicate features. Her green eyes sparkled as she smiled gently at customers, offering colorful bouquets. It was as if time had stopped, preserving her exactly as Richard remembered. With trembling legs, he approached the small flower stand. The woman raised her eyes to him, and for a moment, Richard was sure she would recognize him. His heart almost stopped when she opened a cordial but impersonal smile. "Good afternoon, sir. Would you like to buy some flowers?" The voice. It was the same voice that echoed in his memories, the voice that had lulled him in moments of joy and comforted him in difficult times. But there was no recognition in her gaze. Yes, of course," Richard stammered, trying to regain his composure. "A bouquet of lilies, please." As the woman prepared the arrangement, Richard observed her attentively, looking for any sign that she might be who he thought. Her graceful movements, the way she slightly tilted her head when concentrating, everything was painfully familiar. "Here you go, sir," she said, handing him the bouquet. "That's $50. Richard handed her a $100 bill, his hands trembling slightly. "Keep the change," he said, gathering courage to ask the question that burned in his throat. "Excuse my boldness, but do we know each other from somewhere?" The woman frowned, studying Richard's face for a few seconds. "I'm sorry, I don't remember seeing you before, but I serve so many people every day. Perhaps you've bought flowers here before." No. It must be my imagination," Richard replied, feeling a mixture of disappointment and confusion. "By the way, my name is Richard. And yours?" "Nice to meet you, Richard. I'm Marie," she replied with a gentle smile. Marie, not Helen, as it should be. Richard felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. Was it possible that he was going crazy? That the desire to see his wife again was so strong that he was projecting her image onto a stranger? "Thank you very much, Marie," he managed to say, slowly walking away. As he distanced himself, Richard couldn't stop looking back, watching. Marie turned her attention to other customers. His mind was buzzing with questions and possibilities. Could it be just a cruel coincidence of fate, an incredible look-alike of Helen? Or was there something deeper, more inexplicable happening? Reaching his car, a luxurious black sedan parked on the adjacent street, Richard got in and sat for long minutes, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. The memories he had tried so hard to keep locked, away for the past 20 years now, erupted with full force. Helen, his Helen, the love of his life, torn from him so abruptly and cruelly. The car accident that had supposedly taken not only her life, but also that of the child they were expecting. The searing pain of loss, the void that was never filled, no matter how many professional successes he accumulated. And now, this woman. Marie. Identical to Helen, but with no memory of him, it was as if the universe was playing an elaborate and cruel joke. Taking a deep breath, Richard started the car. He couldn't simply ignore what he had seen. If there was the slightest possibility, That Marie was somehow his Helen, he needed to find out. Years of business experience had taught him to trust his instincts, and at that moment, his entire being screamed that there was more to this story than it appeared. Driving back to his office in the financial heart of the city, Richard was already mentally plotting his next steps. First, he would need discretion. He couldn't simply approach Marie again without raising suspicions. He would need professional help, someone who could investigate this woman's past without alerting her. Upon arriving at the imposing headquarters building of his companies, Richard barely noticed the respectful greetings from employees. His mind was miles away, reliving every detail of the encounter in the square. In his penthouse office, with a panoramic view of the city, Richard sat heavily in his leather chair. His eyes fell on the only photo he kept on the desk, him and Helen smiling on their honeymoon trip. The photo had been taken just weeks before the accident. "I'll find out the truth, my love," he murmured to the image, feeling a determination he hadn't experienced in years. "No matter what happens, I'll understand what's going on." Picking up the phone, he dialed the number of his trusted lawyer. "Charles, it's Richard. I need you to recommend the best private investigator you know. It's a delicate matter." While waiting for the response, Richard looked out the window, watching the sun set over the city. Suddenly, the world that had seemed so predictable and controlled hours before was now filled with possibilities and mysteries. One thing was certain: his life was about to change drastically, and he would do everything to unravel the enigma that fate had just presented to him. That night, for the first time in years, Richard dreamed, not with the recurring nightmare of the accident, but with Helen smiling at him in a field of flowers. In the dream, she extended her hand, calling him, and he ran towards her, determined to never let her go again. Richard Anderson's office, at the top of the building that bore his name, was a monument to his rise in the business world. Floor-to-ceiling bulletproof glass offered a panoramic view of New York City, a city he had helped shape with his ventures. But on this morning, the businessman's eyes did not admire the urban landscape. Sitting in his Italian leather chair, Richard absent-mindedly twirled a pen between his fingers, his gaze fixed on an invisible point. 3 days had passed since the encounter in the square, and the image of Marie, or was it Helen, wouldn't leave his mind. A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he said, straightening up. His secretary, Lisa, a middle-aged woman with perceptive eyes behind thin-framed glasses, entered holding a folder. "Mr. Anderson, the investigator you hired is here." Richard nodded, feeling a mixture of anxiety and expectation. "Send him in, please." Moments later, a man of average height with graying hair and an attentive look entered the room. He wore a simple but well-cut suit and carried a worn leather briefcase. "Mr. Anderson," he greeted, extending his hand. "I'm Mark Oliver. It's a pleasure to meet you in person." Richard stood up to greet him. "The pleasure is mine, Mr. Oliver. Please have a seat." As the investigator settled in, Richard couldn't help but notice the way his eyes quickly scanned the room, as if cataloging every detail. "Before we begin," said Mark, "I'd like to emphasize that everything discussed here will remain in absolute confidentiality. My discretion is as important as my efficiency." Richard nodded, appreciating the professionalism. "Excellent. As you must have been informed, we have a delicate matter to discuss." Mark leaned slightly forward, his attentive eyes fixed on Richard. "I'm aware that this is a personal investigation, Mr. Anderson. Please tell me the details." Taking a deep breath, Richard began the narrative. He spoke about Helen, about the accident that had supposedly taken her from him more than 2 decades ago. And then, with a voice that betrayed his emotion, he described the encounter in the square 3 days before. "It's her, Mr. Oliver, I'm sure. But she didn't recognize me. She says her name is Marie and seems to have no memory of me or our life together." Mark listened attentively, making occasional notes in a small notebook. When Richard finished, he remained silent for a few moments, as if digesting the information. "Mr. Anderson," he began carefully, "I understand how important this is to you, but I need to ask some difficult questions. Are you prepared?" Richard nodded, tense. "Are you absolutely certain that your wife passed away in the accident? Did you see the body? Did you participate in the identification? The question hit Richard like a punch to the stomach. He stood up, walking to the window. The city below continued its frantic rhythm, oblivious to the whirlwind of emotions he was experiencing. No, he finally admitted, his voice almost a whisper. I was in a state of shock. My father took care of everything. He said it would be better if I didn't see, that the memory would be too traumatic. Mark made another note. And what about the funeral? Closed casket, Richard replied, turning to face the investigator. My father insisted. He said it was better to preserve the memory of Helen as she was in life. The investigator nodded slowly. Mr. Anderson, I don't want to give false hope, but based on what you've told me, there's definitely something to investigate here. Richard felt a wave of relief and apprehension at the same time. What do you suggest? First, we need to establish this Marie's identity. Find out her background, where she came from, how long she's been in New York. In parallel, I'll revisit the records of the accident and your wife's passing. There are gaps in this story that need to be filled. Richard sat back down, feeling simultaneously exhausted and electrified. Do whatever is necessary, Mr. Oliver. Costs are not an issue. Mark put away his notebook and stood up. I understand, Mr. Anderson, but I ask that you be prepared for all possibilities. The truth is not always what we expect or desire it to be. As the investigator left, Richard remained there, immersed in thoughts. Mark's words echoed in his mind. Was he really prepared for the truth, whatever it might be? His eyes fell again on Helen's photo on his desk. Her smile, frozen in time, seemed to hold secrets that he was just beginning to glimpse. The rest of the day passed like a blur for Richard. Meetings, phone calls, important decisions. Everything seemed trivial compared to the mystery that now dominated his thoughts. At night, in his luxurious penthouse overlooking Central Park, Richard found himself rummaging through old boxes he hadn't opened in years. Photos, letters, mementos of a life that seemed to have happened in another existence. Among the items, he found the last gift Helen had given him, an antique pocket watch. Inside, an inscription. To my eternal love, R. Time is our ally, H. Holding the watch against his chest, Richard let the tears, long suppressed, finally flow. Oh, Helen, he whispered to the empty room, where have you been all this time? That night, between restless dreams and moments of wakefulness, a certainty formed in Richard's heart. No matter what he discovered, he wouldn't rest until he knew the whole truth. If Helen was alive, he would find her. And if she wasn't, well, he would finally have closure for the pain he had carried for so many years. The following day dawned with New York City shrouded in a fine drizzle, as if the city shared the melancholy and expectation that hung over Richard. He prepared for another day at the office, but knew his mind would be far from spreadsheets and contracts. Meanwhile, in a small flower shop in the center of the city, Marie began her workday, oblivious to the turmoil that her mere existence had unleashed. She arranged the bouquets carefully, humming softly a melody she didn't know where she knew from, but which always made her feel strangely nostalgic. For a brief moment, her eyes fell on an arrangement of lilies, and she found herself thinking about the man in the suit who had bought them days ago. There was something familiar about him, something that made her heart race for an instant, but as quickly as it came, the sensation was gone, leaving only a vague feeling that something important was eluding her. The lives of both were about to intertwine in ways that neither could imagine. And as the day progressed, the gears of destiny, or were they of long-hidden truth, began to move. The morning had barely begun when Marie opened the doors of her small flower shop in the heart of New York City. The aroma of freshly arrived roses mingled with the smell of fresh coffee she had prepared in a coffee maker in the corner of the store. It was a daily ritual that helped her face the long hours of work ahead. While arranging the vases in the window display, Marie found herself humming a melody she couldn't identify. It was something that had popped into her mind a few days ago, since the encounter with that man in a suit who had bought the lilies. The music brought a strange sensation, as if it were the soundtrack of a movie she didn't remember watching. "Good morning, Ms. Marie," the cheerful voice of Julia, her young assistant, pulled her from her reverie. "Good morning, dear," Marie responded with a warm smile. "Ready for another day?" Julia nodded, already putting on her floral apron. "Always. Oh, I brought those cheese breads you like so much." The affectionate gesture warmed Marie's heart. Julia was like a daughter to her, filling a void that even Marie didn't fully understand. As the two women busied themselves with preparations for the day, on the other side of the city, Richard Anderson faced his own morning routine with palpable anxiety. Sitting in his office, he had barely touched the coffee that Lisa had brought him. His eyes alternated between the computer screen, where he tried to concentrate on financial reports, and the phone, anxiously waiting for news from investigator Mark. It was around 10 in the morning when the phone finally rang. "Mr. Anderson," Mark's voice sounded from the other end of the line. "I have some preliminary information. I prefer to discuss it in person. Can we meet?" Richard's heart raced. "Of course, come to my office immediately." Half an hour later, Mark entered the room carrying a thin folder. His face betrayed no emotion, maintaining the professionalism that characterized him. "Mr. Anderson," he began, sitting down, "as I said, this is preliminary information. I ask that you keep that in mind." Richard nodded, tense. "Please, proceed." Mark opened the folder. "About the woman you saw, Marie Smith. She has owned a flower shop downtown for about 15 years. She lives alone in a modest apartment near the store. There are no records of close family." Richard absorbed the information, feeling a mixture of hope and confusion. "And before that?" The investigator hesitated for a moment. "That's where things get interesting. I couldn't find reliable records of Marie Smith before 2005. It's as if she had simply appeared." The revelation hit Richard like lightning. 2005. Exactly when? "Helen's accident was in 2004, he murmured, more to himself than to Mark. The investigator nodded gravely. "Exactly, there's more. I managed to access Marie's medical records. In 2005, she was treated for a condition called dissociative amnesia. Apparently, she was found disoriented in a small town upstate, with no memory of who she was or where she came from." Richard felt the world spin around him. Was it possible? Could Marie really be? "Mr. Anderson," Mark's voice brought him back to reality. "I know this seems promising, but we can't jump to conclusions. There's still much to be investigated." Richard stood up, walking to the window. The city below continued its frantic pace, oblivious to the whirlwind of emotions he was experiencing. "What do you suggest as the next step?" he asked, his voice trembling. "We need to investigate the 2004 accident more thoroughly. The hospital records, the police report, everything, and—" Mark paused as if carefully choosing his words. "It might be time to confront your father about what really happened back then." The mention of his father made Richard turn abruptly. William Anderson, the family patriarch, had always been an imposing and, at times, intimidating figure. The idea of questioning him about that fateful night made Richard feel a chill down his spine. "My father," he began, hesitant. "He always said he took care of everything to protect me. But now we need answers," Mark completed softly. "Mr. Anderson, I know it's difficult, but if we want to get to the truth, we can't leave any stone unturned." Richard nodded slowly. "You're right, I'll talk to him." As Mark prepared to leave, promising to continue the investigation, Richard found himself immersed in long-suppressed memories. The night of the accident, the phone call, his father, William, arriving with a grave face, saying that Helen— Richard closed his eyes, trying to push away the pain that those memories brought. But now, mixed with the pain, there was a spark of hope and a fierce determination to discover the truth, no matter the cost. That afternoon, after hours of internal debate, Richard finally picked up the phone and dialed his father's number. "Dad," he said when William answered, "we need to talk. About Helen, about what really happened that night." On the other end of the line, there was a long silence. When William finally spoke, his voice sounded tired and apprehensive. "Son, I thought we had left the past behind. Why stir up old wounds?" Richard took a deep breath. "Because, Dad, I think these wounds never really healed, and because Because I think Helen might be alive. Another silence, this time heavier, more laden with guilt. Come have dinner with me tomorrow night, William finally said. We have a lot to talk about. Meanwhile, at the flower shop, Marie was preparing to close the store. The day had been busy, but productive. As she arranged the last vases, her eyes fell on a bouquet of lilies. For a moment, the image of the man in the suit, Richard, she remembered, flashed in her mind. A sudden wave of dizziness made her lean on the counter. For an instant, she had the impression of seeing an unfamiliar room, hearing a familiar laugh, feeling the touch of hands that, as quickly as it came, the sensation was gone, leaving Marie confused and slightly scared. What was happening to her? Shaking her head to push away those strange thoughts, she finished closing the store and stepped out into the New York night. Without knowing that, a few miles away, a man was struggling to unravel a mystery that could change their lives forever. The city, vast and imposing, kept its secrets. But for how much longer? The Antica Roma restaurant, one of the most exclusive, in New York, was almost empty on that Wednesday night. In the mezzanine, isolated from the main hall, Richard Anderson anxiously awaited his father's arrival. The table, set for two with its white linen tablecloth and silver cutlery, seemed strangely formal for a conversation that promised to be so intimate and potentially painful. Richard absent-mindedly twirled the glass of red wine in his hands, watching the dark liquid dance inside the crystal. His mind was miles away, reliving memories of Helen, of the accident, and now, mixing with all of this, the image of Marie. The sound of firm footsteps brought him back to the present. William Anderson, at 80 years old, was still an imposing figure. Tall, with completely white hair and piercing blue eyes, he carried an aura of authority that seemed to make the air around him vibrate. "Son," William greeted, his deep voice echoing in the empty space. Richard stood up, briefly embracing his father before both sat down. For a moment, they remained silent, as if measuring the words that would follow. It was William who broke the silence. "So, you think Helen might be alive?" It wasn't a question, but a statement. Richard nodded slowly. "Dad, I saw her. Or at least, I think I saw her," he began, his voice betraying the contained emotion. "A woman identical to her, selling flowers downtown. She didn't recognize. Me says her name is Marie, but—" William raised a hand, interrupting him. His face, usually a mask of control, showed signs of tension. "Before we continue, Richard, I need you to understand one thing," he said, leaning forward. "Everything I did, all the decisions I made, were thinking of your good." Richard felt a chill down his spine. "What do you mean by that, Dad?" William sighed deeply, seeming to age 10 years in an instant. "That night, when I received the call about Helen's accident, things weren't exactly as I told you." Richard's heart raced. He braced himself for what was to come, knowing instinctively that he was about to hear something that would change his life forever. "Helen survived the initial accident," William continued, his voice now almost a whisper. "When I arrived at the hospital, she was in critical condition. The doctors, they didn't give much hope." Richard felt tears well up in his eyes. "Why did you never tell me this?" "Because you were already devastated, son, and because I made a decision that night that changed everything." William paused, as if gathering courage to continue. The waiter approached to serve the dishes, but with a gesture the patriarch dismissed him. "Helen was pregnant, as you know. The doctors performed an emergency C-section to try to save the baby. It was a girl, Richard. Your daughter survived." The world seemed to stop for Richard. His daughter, alive. Where is she?" he managed to stammer, his voice barely coming out. William lowered his eyes, guilt evident in his expression. "I gave her up for adoption, Richard. I thought it would be better that way. You were falling apart, the company was going through a crisis. I thought a baby would be too much for you to handle at that moment." Richard stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly on the floor. How could you make that decision for me?" "Son, please understand." "And Helen," Richard interrupted, his voice now raised. "What happened to her?" William hesitated for a moment. She fell into a coma, Richard. The doctors didn't know if or when she would wake up. I transferred her to a private clinic far from New York. Richard felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. Everything he believed, everything he had lived for the past 20 years was based on a lie. Why, Dad? Why do this to us? William stood up too, his face a mask of remorse and determination. Because I thought I was protecting you, protecting our family's legacy. Helen, she came from a simple family, Richard. I always thought she distracted you from your potential, from your future in business. When I had the opportunity to start over, I took it. Richard felt a wave of nausea. The implications of what his father was saying were almost unbearable. You planned the accident?" he asked, his voice trembling. William paled. "No, never. The accident was real, Richard. I just took advantage of the circumstances." For a long moment, father and son stared at each other in silence. The weight of the revelations hung over them like a dark cloud. "Where is she now, Dad?" Richard finally asked, his voice cold and controlled. William hesitated. I don't know for sure. I lost contact with the clinic a few years ago. But if this Marie you saw, it's possible that..." Richard didn't wait for him to finish. Grabbing his coat, he headed for the exit of the restaurant. "Son, please," William called, his voice pleading. "Let me explain." But Richard was already far away, his mind a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, sadness, hope, all mixing in an effervescent cauldron. As he drove through the illuminated streets of New York, Richard knew his life would never be the same again. Helen was alive. His daughter was out there somewhere, and he would do everything to find them and make up for lost time. In the modest apartment above the flower shop, Marie woke up startled. Another strange dream, filled with unfamiliar faces and places she had never visited. Sitting up in bed, she rubbed her eyes, trying to push away the feeling that something important was about to happen. Little did she know that at that very moment, fate was setting in motion gears that would change her life forever. The day dawned gray in New York City, as if the sky reflected the turmoil of emotions that agitated Richard Anderson's heart. After a sleepless night, he found himself in his office before the sun even rose, his bloodshot eyes fixed on the computer screen as he frantically searched for any information that could lead to Helen or Marie. The phone rang, startling him. It was Mark, the investigator. "Mr. Anderson," the grave voice sounded from the other end of the line. "I have news. I managed to locate the clinic mentioned by your father." Richard felt his heart race. "Where?" "A small town in upstate New York. Apparently the clinic closed about 5 years ago, but I managed to contact a former employee. He remembers a patient who matches your wife's description." "And what happened to her?" Richard asked, barely able to contain the anxiety in his voice. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "According to the employee, the patient woke up from the coma about 18 years ago, but suffered from severe amnesia. She was transferred to a rehabilitation program in New York City shortly after." Richard felt a mixture of relief and frustration. It was another piece of the puzzle, but there was still so much missing. "Mark, I need you to find out everything about this rehabilitation program and about my daughter. We need to find her too." "Understood, Mr. Anderson. I'm working on it. I'll keep you informed." As soon as he hung up, Richard made a decision. He couldn't just sit still, waiting. He needed to see Marie again, talk to her, even if she didn't recognize him. Meanwhile, at the flower shop, Marie was preparing for another day of work. But something was different. The dreams from the night before still echoed in her mind, bringing an uneasiness that she couldn't explain. "Ms. Marie, is everything okay?" Julia asked, noticing her boss's distracted air. Marie forced a smile. "Yes, dear. I just didn't sleep very well." While arranging a bouquet of roses, Marie found herself humming that unknown melody again. Suddenly, an image flashed in her mind. Herself, younger, dancing in a sunlit room, in the arms of a man whose face she couldn't clearly see. The vision left her so dazed that she dropped the vase she was holding, spilling water and flowers across the shop floor. "Ms. Marie!" Julia exclaimed, running to help. I'm fine," Marie muttered. but her hands were shaking as she tried to pick up the shards. It was at that moment that the door of the flower shop opened. Marie looked up and her heart almost stopped. There, standing in the doorway, was Richard Anderson. For an instant, time seemed to freeze. Richard looked at Marie, his heart pounding in his chest, desperately searching for any sign of recognition in her eyes. Marie, in turn, felt a wave of something. It wasn't quite recognition, but a strange sense of familiarity, as if she were seeing an old friend after decades of separation. "Hello," Richard finally managed to say, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I came to buy more flowers." Marie slowly stood up, still a bit dazed. "Of course, sir. What would you like today?" Richard took a step forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "Actually, I'd like to talk to you if possible." Julia, sensing the tension in the air, discreetly retreated to the back of the store. Marie frowned, a slight headache beginning to form. "Talk? About what?" Richard took a deep breath. It was now or never. "About your past, Marie. Or should I say, Helen?" The name hit Marie like lightning. Fragmented images flooded her mind. A car skidding in the rain, the sound of twisting metal, a muffled scream. Her legs weakened and she leaned on the counter to keep from falling. Who are you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Richard approached, fighting against the urge to embrace her. "My name is Richard Anderson, and I believe you are my wife Helen, the woman I thought I had lost more than 20 years ago." Marie, or was it Helen, felt the world spin around her. Fragments of memories, dreams, and reality mixed in her mind, creating a confusing kaleidoscope of images and emotions. I don't understand," she murmured, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "I am Marie. I've always been Marie." But even as she said these words, a part of her knew it wasn't true. The gaps in her memories, the strange dreams, the constant feeling that something important was missing, everything was starting to make a terrible sense. Richard, seeing her distress, took a step back. "I know this is a shock. I didn't come here to disturb your life, but things have happened, things you need to know about your past, about our daughter." The mention of a daughter was too much for Marie. With a muffled sob, she staggered backwards, her legs finally giving way. Richard caught her before she fell, holding her in his arms for the first time in 2 decades. The familiar touch, her scent, all of this brought back an avalanche of memories and emotions. "Please," he whispered, his voice choked. "Let me explain. Let me help you remember." At that moment, with Richard holding her and the past knocking at the door of her mind, Marie, or Helen, knew that her life was about to change forever. The puzzle of her existence, for so long incomplete, was finally beginning to take shape. And while the world outside continued its course, in that small flower shop in the heart of New York City, 2 long separated souls began the journey of rediscovering each other and themselves. The aroma of flowers mingled with the smell of freshly brewed tea in the small apartment above the flower shop. Marie, or was it Helen, sat in her favorite armchair, holding a steaming cup with trembling hands, while Richard occupied the sofa across from her, leaning forward, anxious and apprehensive. Julia, concerned about Marie's state, had insisted on closing the shop early, promising to return the next day. Now in the silence of the apartment, the weight of the revelations hung in the air like a dense cloud. I don't know where to start." Marie finally broke the silence, her voice almost a whisper. Richard nodded understandingly. "Maybe we can start with what you remember. What's your earliest clear memory?" Marie closed her eyes, searching her mind for the oldest memories. "I remember waking up in a hospital. I was confused, scared. The doctors told me I had been in an accident and that I had amnesia." "How long ago was this?" Richard asked softly. "About 18 years ago, I think," she replied, opening her eyes to look at him. "They told me my name was Marie Smith, that I had no close family. I went through a rehabilitation program, learned new skills, started my life from scratch." Richard felt his heart tighten. 18 years. So much lost time. "Helen." "Marie," he corrected himself quickly. What I'm going to tell you may seem unbelievable, but I ask that you listen to me until the end." She nodded, bracing herself for what was to come. Richard then began to narrate the story of his marriage, to Helen, the love they shared, the much-desired pregnancy. He spoke about the night of the accident, about how he believed for so long that she had passed away. And then, with a voice choked with emotion, he told about the recent revelations made by his father. As Richard spoke, Marie felt as if someone was opening doors in her mind that she didn't even know existed. Flashes of memory, fragments of a life she didn't recognize as her own, began to emerge. I remember a garden," she murmured, interrupting. "Richard, a garden full of red roses. I was pregnant, happy." Richard felt tears well up in his eyes. "Our garden. You loved taking care of it. You said you wanted our baby to grow up surrounded by beauty." The mention of the baby made Marie look up abruptly. "The child, our daughter, what happened to her?" Richard took a deep breath, preparing to reveal the most painful part of the story. "My father, he gave her up for adoption right after birth. I didn't even know she had survived until yesterday." Marie let out a sob, covering her mouth with her hands. The pain of loss, even of something she didn't fully remember, was overwhelming. How could he?" she whispered through tears. Richard stood up, unable to contain the urge to comfort her. He knelt beside the armchair, hesitant, not knowing if he should touch her. "I promise you," he said, his voice filled with determination. "We will find her, our daughter. We'll bring her back to us." Marie looked at him, seeing for the first time not a stranger, but a man who shared her pain, her hopes. Impulsively, she reached out, touching Richard's face. The touch triggered another wave of memories, a kiss in the rain, shared laughter on a sunny beach, the feeling of safety in his arms. "Richard," she whispered, testing the name on her lips. It sounded right, familiar. He covered her hand with his, silent tears streaming down his face. "I'm here, Helen. I'm here, and I'll never leave you again." For a long moment, they stayed like this, connected not just by physical touch, but by a shared history that was slowly emerging from the shadows of forgetfulness. Finally, Marie, or was it Helen, she wasn't sure anymore, gently pulled away. It's too much to absorb all at once," she said, wiping away tears. "I need time to process all of this." Richard nodded, understanding. "Of course. I understand. I don't want to pressure you, but can I come back tomorrow? There's still so much for us to talk about, to remember together." She hesitated for a moment, then agreed. "Yes, please. Come back tomorrow." As Richard prepared to leave, Marie called him one last time. "Richard?" He turned, hopeful. "Our daughter. What's her name?" Richard felt a lump in his throat. I don't know. My father never told me. But I promise we'll find out. We'll find her, Helen, together." After Richard left, Marie sat for hours, looking out the window without really seeing anything. Her mind was a whirlwind of old and new, memories of doubts and certainties. Who was she really? Marie Smith, the lonely florist, or Helen Anderson, wife and mother? As night fell over New York City, she knew that her journey of self-discovery was just beginning. Held somewhere out there, a young woman who knew nothing about her true past was living her life, unaware that her biological parents were about to turn her world upside down. The search for truth and the long-lost family was just beginning, and none of them could predict the challenges and revelations that awaited them. The sun had barely risen when Richard arrived at the office the next morning. His eyes were marked by deep, dark circles, witnesses to a sleepless night full of memories and renewed hopes. With anxious fingers, he dialed Mark's number, the investigator. "Mark, good morning. I need you to focus all your efforts on finding my daughter. She must be around 20 years old now. Look for adoptions that took place at the time of the accident, especially those that might have some connection to my father or the clinic where Helen was." On the other end of the line, Mark made some notes. "Understood, Mr. Anderson. I've already started investigating from that angle. Is there anything else that might help me narrow down the search?" Richard hesitated for a moment. Yes. Look, for someone with a talent for art or gardening, Helen always said our baby would inherit her passion for flowers. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, in a modest art studio, a young woman with brown hair and intense green eyes was putting the finishing touches on a canvas. Olivia Sanders, 20 years old, was considered a promise in the world of contemporary art. Her paintings, invariably filled with vibrant flowers and dreamlike landscapes, had already caught the attention of critics and collectors. Stepping back from the canvas to admire her work, Olivia felt that familiar sense of restlessness that always accompanied her. Despite her precocious success and the love of her adoptive parents, something always seemed to be missing in her life. A piece of the puzzle that she couldn't find. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. "Hello, Mom," she answered, a smile softening her features. "Olivia, sweetie?" The affectionate voice of Clara Sanders sounded from the other end. "I just wanted to remind you about dinner tonight. Your father and I have something important to talk to you about." Olivia frowned, intrigued. "Something important? Did something happen?" There was a pause before Clara answered. "It's nothing to worry about, my love. Just, there are some things about your past that we think it's time for you to know." Olivia's heart raced. Her past? Would it be information about her biological parents? "Okay, Mom, I'll be there at 7 as agreed." Hanging up the phone, Olivia turned her attention back to the canvas in front of her. The painting showed a vast field of lilies, with a female figure in the background, with her back turned as if walking away. It was an image that had haunted her for years, appearing in her dreams and materializing in her paintings. Meanwhile, at the flower shop, Marie, or Helen, she still struggled to define her identity, nervously prepared for Richard's visit. The previous night had been a whirlwind of emotions and fragmented memories. When Richard entered the shop, bringing with him an old photo album, Marie felt her heart skip. There was something terribly familiar about that scene. "Good morning," Richard said softly. "I thought this might help trigger more memories." Seated in the small office at the back of the shop, they began to leaf through the album. Each photo was like a window to a forgotten past. Marie touched the images with trembling fingers, silent tears streaming down her face. "This garden," she murmured, pointing to a photo where a younger version of her smiled, surrounded by roses. "I dreamed about it last night." Richard nodded, emotional. "It was your refuge. You spent hours tending to the flowers, talking to them. You said each one had a story to tell." As they progressed through the album, more memories began to resurface. Their wedding day, trips, everyday moments that suddenly took on new meaning. Then they came to a photo that made Marie gasp. In it she appeared pregnant, radiant, caressing her prominent belly. "Our daughter," she whispered, tracing the outline of her belly in the photo. Richard covered her hand with his. "We'll find her, Helen, I promise." At that moment, Richard's cell phone rang. It was Mark. "Mr. Anderson," the investigator's voice sounded urgent. "I think I've found a lead about your daughter. There's a young artist, Olivia Sanders, who matches the age and has a remarkable talent for painting flowers. Moreover, I discovered that she was adopted at the same time as the accident." Richard felt the world spin. His daughter. So close. "Where is she? How can we find her?" he asked, his voice trembling with emotion. Mark provided the details he had discovered, including the address of Olivia's studio. Hanging up the phone, Richard turned to Marie, his eyes shining with hope and fear. "Helen," he said softly, "I think we've found our daughter." Marie felt as if the air had been sucked from her lungs. After so many years, so many losses, the possibility of reuniting with the daughter she didn't even remember having was overwhelming. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Richard held her hands, his eyes fixed on hers. "Now, my love, we're going to bring our family back together. Together." Meanwhile, in her studio, Olivia was putting the finishing touches on her painting, unaware that her life was about to change forever. Fate, long delayed, was finally putting all the pieces in place. The reunion of a fragmented family was about to begin, bringing with it promises of joy, but also the weight of long-buried secrets. The next chapter of their lives was about to be written, and none of them could predict the emotions and revelations that awaited them. Olivia Sanders' studio was a bright and welcoming space, filled with canvases in various stages of creation. The aroma of oil paint and turpentine hung in the air, mixing with the soft scent of fresh flowers that she always kept nearby for inspiration. That afternoon, Olivia was immersed in her work, putting the finishing touches on a new piece. The painting depicted a vast field of lilies under a stormy sky, with a solitary figure in the distance. There was a palpable melancholy in the work, a feeling of loss and search that permeated much of her creations. A soft knock on the door pulled her from her creative trance. "Come in," she called, cleaning her hands on a cloth. The door opened, revealing Clara Sanders, her adoptive mother. Clara was a middle-aged woman with gentle eyes and a warm smile that always made Olivia feel safe. "Sweetie," Clara began, hesitant, "I know we agreed to talk at dinner, but something happened and we thought it best to come talk to you now." Olivia frowned, noticing the tension on her mother's face. "Mum, what happened? You're scaring me." Clara took a deep breath before continuing. "Olivia, love, we received a call today. A man, he says he's your biological father." The world seemed to stop for Olivia. The brush she was holding slipped from her fingers, falling to the floor with a dull thud. My biological father," she whispered, feeling her legs weaken. Clara approached, gently guiding her to a nearby stool. "Yes, dear. He and your biological mother, they want to meet you." Olivia felt a mix of emotions wash over her: shock, fear, curiosity, hope. All her life she had wondered about her origins, about why she had been given up for adoption, and now suddenly the answers seemed to be within her reach. How did they find me?" she asked, her voice trembling. Clara hesitated. "It's a complicated story, love. From what it seems, they didn't know of your existence until very recently. There were circumstances that separated them from you." Olivia absorbed the information, her mind a whirlwind of questions. "They want to see me? When? They are—" "Well, they're here, Olivia, downstairs waiting." Olivia's heart leaped so close. Her biological parents, people she had imagined 1,000 times, were just a few flights of stairs away. I don't know if I'm ready," she murmured, feeling panic rise in her chest. Clara hugged her tenderly. "No one is pressuring you, my love. If you don't want to see them now, that's okay. Your father and I will support any decision you make." Olivia closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. Her entire life had been shaped by the absence of these two strangers. Her paintings, her dreams, that constant feeling that something was missing. Everything led to this moment. "No," she finally said, opening her eyes with renewed determination. "I want to see them. I need to see them." Meanwhile, downstairs, Richard and Marie waited anxiously. Both their hearts were racing, a mixture of fear and hope palpable in the air. Marie held Richard's hand tightly, seeking strength and comfort. More memories had returned in the last few hours, recollections of the pregnancy, the anticipation of the birth, the love she had felt for that baby she had never gotten to hold in her arms. "What if she hates us?" Marie whispered, giving voice to the fear that consumed her. Richard gently squeezed her hand. "She's our daughter, Helen. Part of us. No matter what happens, we'll face it together." The sound of footsteps on the stairs made both of them hold their breath. And then there she was. Olivia descended the stairs slowly, her green eyes, so similar to Marie's, scanning the anxious faces that awaited her. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. 3 hearts beating in unison, 3 lives about to intertwine again after 2 decades of separation. Marie let out a muffled sob. There before her was the living proof of the love she had shared with Richard, the child she thought she had lost forever. Richard, in turn, struggled to contain his tears. His daughter was the perfect blend of him and Helen, a living work of art that surpassed any painting he had ever seen. Olivia stopped on the last step, her eyes alternating between the 2 strangers, who watched her with so much love and longing. "Hi," she finally said, her voice almost a whisper. "I'm Olivia. Marie took a step forward, extending a trembling hand. "Olivia," she repeated, savoring the name. I'm your mother, Helen." Richard joined them, his voice choked with emotion. "And I'm Richard, your father." Olivia looked at the outstretched hands of her biological parents, feeling the weight of that moment. There was so much to be said, so many questions to be asked, so many emotions to be processed. With her heart racing, she finally extended her own hands, touching those of her parents for the first time in 20 years. The contact was like a spark, triggering a wave of emotions that none of them was fully prepared to face. Tears, hesitant smiles, and broken words mixed as the family, separated for so long, took the first steps towards reconciliation. But as this moment of reunion unfolded, none of them noticed the shadowy figure watching them from afar. William Anderson, the patriarch whose decision had separated this family 2 decades ago, watched the scene with a mixture of remorse and apprehension. He knew that his presence there would change everything again, and that the secrets he still kept had the power to shake the fragile foundations of this reunion. Fate had brought the family together, but the path ahead was still fraught with obstacles and revelations that would test the newly formed bonds. The cozy cafe on the ground floor of Olivia's building became the unlikely setting for the reunion of a long-separated family. Seated at a secluded table, Richard, Marie, and Olivia looked at each other, a silence laden with emotion hanging between them. Olivia was the first to break the silence. "Why?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Why did you abandon me?" The question hit Richard and Marie like a punch to the stomach. Marie closed her eyes, fighting back tears. Richard took a deep breath before answering. "Olivia, we never abandoned you, at least not intentionally." He then began to tell the story of the accident, Marie's amnesia, his father's lies. As the narrative unfolded, Olivia's eyes widened in shock and disbelief. "So you didn't know I existed? Until now?" Marie nodded, tears silently streaming down her face. "I didn't even remember being pregnant, sweetheart. My memory, it's still coming back in pieces." Olivia absorbed the information, feeling a confusing mix of emotions. Anger at the situation, relief at not having been simply abandoned, fear of the unknown that was opening up before her. "And now?" she asked, her voice small. "What happens now?" Richard extended his hand, hesitant, across the table. After a moment of hesitation, Olivia held it. "Now, if you want, we'd like to get to know you, to be part of your life." At that moment, the cafe door opened and William Anderson entered. The air seemed to freeze when everyone at the table saw him. Richard stood up abruptly, his face a mask of contained fury. "Dad, what are you doing here?" William raised his hands in a placating gesture. "Son, I came to ask for forgiveness and to tell the whole truth." Olivia looked confused from one to the other. "Who is he?" Marie, who had recovered more memories in recent days, answered with a trembling voice, "He's your grandfather, Olivia, Richard's father." William approached the table, his eyes laden with remorse. "May I sit down? There are things you need to know, things I should have said a long time ago." Reluctantly, Richard gestured for his father to sit. The tension was palpable. William began to speak, his voice tired. "What I did was unforgivable. I thought I was protecting the family's interests, our business, but in reality I was just being selfish and controlling." He then revealed how he had manipulated the situation after the accident, how he had used his influence to keep Helen, now Marie, away, how he had orchestrated Olivia's adoption. "I thought I was giving everyone a fresh start," he concluded. His voice choked. "But in reality, I stole 20 years from you, and there's no excuse for that." The silence that followed was deafening. Richard trembled with contained anger. Marie cried silently, and Olivia seemed in shock. It was Olivia who finally spoke. "So, my whole life was based on a lie." William lowered his head, unable to face his granddaughter's accusing gaze. "Yes, and I'm sorry more than I can express." Richard stood up again, his voice cutting. Being sorry isn't enough, Dad. You destroyed our lives. How do you expect us to forgive this? Marie, who had been silent until then, surprised everyone by speaking. We can't change the past, she said softly, but we can choose how to go forward from here. All eyes turned to her. Marie continued, her voice gaining strength. I lost 20 years of memories, of life with my husband and my daughter, but now we have the chance to recover something. We can't waste more time with anger and resentment. Olivia, tears in her eyes, nodded slowly. I always felt something was missing. Now I know what. And as difficult as it is, I want to try to get to know you, to be a family. Richard, still trembling with emotion, looked at his wife and daughter. The love he felt for them surpassed the anger he harbored for his father. Slowly, he sat down again. It won't be easy, he said, looking directly at William. There's a lot to be forgiven, a lot to be rebuilt. But we're willing to try. William, tears streaming down his wrinkled face, nodded. It's more than I deserve, thank you. At that moment, there in that cafe, a fragmented family took the first steps toward healing. The path would be long and difficult, full of painful conversations and intense emotions, but there was also hope. As the afternoon progressed, they continued talking. Olivia spoke about her art, Marie about her flower shop, Richard about his years of silent searching. Gradually, the pieces of their lives began to fit together. When they finally said goodbye, hours later, there was a cautious feeling of optimism. They had arranged to meet again, to continue exploring this new emotional territory. As Olivia watched her biological parents and newly discovered grandfather walk away, she felt something change within her. The gaps in her paintings, the emptiness she had always felt, began to make sense. Returning to her studio, she picked up a brush, feeling an inspiration she hadn't experienced in years. On the blank canvas, the image of a family began to emerge, broken, imperfect, but coming together again. It was the beginning of a new chapter, not only in her art, but in her life. And for the first time in a long time, Olivia felt that she was exactly where she should be. The weeks that followed the reunion were an emotional roller coaster for everyone involved. Richard, Marie, and Olivia began meeting regularly, trying to build a relationship that transcended the two lost decades. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, the three were walking through Central Park, the green heart of New York City. Olivia, with her sketchbook under her arm, carefully observed her biological parents. It was fascinating for her to notice the small gestures and mannerisms she had inherited from each of them. You know, Olivia began, breaking a comfortable silence, I always wondered where my passion for flowers and colors came from. Now it makes sense. She smiled at Marie, who returned the gesture with tears in her eyes. Marie reached out, gently, touching her daughter's arm. Do you remember when I said that each flower has a story? It seems you carried that belief without even knowing it. Richard watched the interaction between mother and daughter with a full heart. And the determination, he added with a smile. You definitely inherited that from both of us. They stopped near a small lake, sitting on a bench. Olivia opened her sketchbook and began to draw the scene before her. Families strolling, children playing, nature in harmony with the city. How are the therapy sessions going? Olivia asked, her eyes alternating between the paper and her parents. Richard sighed. Difficult but necessary. There's so much to process, so many repressed emotions for years. Marie nodded. The therapist says it's normal for us to feel a mixture of joy and grief. We're happy to be together again, but also mourning the lost time. Olivia paused her drawing for a moment, reflecting. I understand. Sometimes I find myself thinking about what it would have been like to grow up with you. But then I remember my adoptive parents, how much love they gave me, and I feel guilty. Richard leaned in, taking Olivia's hand. Don't feel guilty, dear. Love is not a finite resource. You can love your adoptive parents and still have room in your heart for us. Marie agreed. They took care of you when we couldn't. We'll always be grateful to them for that. The sound of a notification interrupted the moment. It was Richard's phone. He frowned as he read the message. It's from my father, he said, his voice tense. He wants to meet us. All of us." The air around them seemed to get heavier. William Anderson was still a delicate subject, a wound that had barely begun to heal. Olivia was the first to break the silence. "I think we should go," she said softly. "He's part of this story, for better or worse, and if we really want to move forward, we need to face this together." Richard and Marie exchanged glances. There was pride in both their eyes at their daughter's maturity. "You're right," Marie said. "We can't run from the past. We need to face it to really build our future." Richard nodded reluctantly. "I'll reply that we'll go, but on our terms, at our pace." As Richard typed the response, Olivia returned to her drawing. But now, in addition to the park scene, she began to add figures in the background. 4 silhouettes together but with space between them. A family in the process of healing. "What do you think about going to the flower shop after this?" Marie suggested. "We could put together an arrangement together, something to symbolize this new beginning." Olivia's eyes lit up at the idea. "I'd love that. Can we use lilies? They've always been my favorite flowers." Richard smiled, remembering something. "Did you know that lilies were the flowers at our wedding, Helen?" Marie blinked, surprised. "That's right. How could I forget?" The three laughed together, a sound that was becoming more and more natural between them. It was a reminder that despite the difficulties, there was joy in this journey of rediscovery. As they left the park, heading to the flower shop, each carried with them a mixture of emotions. Hope for the future, nostalgia for the lost past, and a renewed determination to make this new chance work. The meeting with William loomed on the horizon, a necessary but dreaded conversation. But for now they would focus on the present, on creating new memories, on learning about each other, on rebuilding the bonds that time and circumstances had broken. In the flower shop, among the aroma of flowers and the soft murmur of conversations and laughter, a family would continue its journey of healing. Each flower chosen, each arrangement created, would be a step towards a future that, although uncertain, was full of possibilities. And Olivia, watching her parents work side by side, felt that she was finally filling that void that had always existed in her heart. Her next painting, she decided, would be a portrait of this scene. Not perfect, not without scars, but full of love and hope. The restaurant chosen for the meeting with William was elegant and discreet, located in an upscale neighborhood of New York. Richard, Marie, and Olivia arrived together, a little before the scheduled time. The tension was palpable among them. "Are you ready for this?" Richard asked, his voice laden with concern. Marie nodded, squeezing her husband's hand. "Together, we can face anything." Olivia, for her part, seemed lost in thought. Since learning about the existence of her grandfather and the role he had played in separating her family, she had been struggling with conflicting feelings. When William arrived, the silence that settled at the table was almost deafening. The Anderson patriarch seemed to have aged years since the last encounter, the weight of his actions clearly visible in his demeanor. "Thank you for coming," he began, his voice trembling. "I know I don't deserve the opportunity to be here with you." "But," Richard interrupted him, his voice controlled but harsh. "Dad, we're here because we believe it's necessary for our family's healing process. But don't confuse this with forgiveness. There's still much to be discussed." William nodded, accepting his son's words. His gaze turned to Olivia, who was staring at him with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. "Olivia," he said softly, "I know I can never make up for the years I stole from you, from all of you. But I'd like to try if you'll allow me." Olivia took a deep breath before responding. "Mr. Anderson, or should I say Grandpa, I'm still trying to understand all of this. Why did you do what you did? How could you separate a family like that?" William closed his eyes for a moment, as if seeking strength to reveal long-held truths. When he opened them again, they were teary. "I came from a generation and a world where family business was everything," he began. "When Richard fell in love with Helen, I saw it as a threat to the future I had planned for him, for our company." Marie, who until then had been silent, spoke with a trembling voice. "So you decided to separate us, to make me forget my entire life?" William shook his head. "The accident was real, Helen. I never planned that. But when it happened, I saw an opportunity to correct what I considered a mistake. Richard clenched his fists, struggling to maintain his composure. And our daughter. How could you give your own blood up for adoption? I thought I was giving her a chance at a better life, William responded, his voice almost a whisper. Away from the scandals, the pressures of our family. But now I see that I was wrong. Terribly wrong. Olivia, who had been absorbing every word, finally spoke. You know, for years I wondered why I was abandoned. I imagined 1,000 scenarios, but never something like this. William extended a trembling hand across the table, not daring to touch anyone, but offering a gesture of supplication. I know words can't undo what I did, but I'm here to offer whatever I can. Information, resources, anything that might help. Repair the damage I caused. Richard exchanged glances with Marie and Olivia before responding. Dad, we need time. Time to process all of this, to heal. We can't just pretend the last 20 years didn't happen. Marie nodded in agreement. But, she added softly, we also can't live trapped in the past. Maybe we can find a way forward together. Olivia, surprising everyone, extended her hand and lightly touched William's. I spent a lot of time painting the void I felt. Now that I know the truth, as painful as it is, at least I can start to fill that void with understanding. William couldn't contain his tears at his granddaughter's gesture. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for this chance I don't deserve. The rest of the dinner transpired in a mixture of tense conversations and moments of reflective silence. Plans were made for family therapy sessions, and William committed to providing all the records and information that might still be missing about the past. At the end of the night, when they said goodbye, there was a cautious feeling of progress. Not complete forgiveness, not yet, but a first step towards understanding and perhaps one day reconciliation. As Richard, Marie, and Olivia walked together to the car, Olivia spoke, her voice full of emotion. You know, I think I finally have the theme for my next exhibition. What is it? Marie asked, curious. Olivia smiled, a bittersweet smile. I'll call it Rediscovered Roots. It will be about family, forgiveness, and the journey of healing. Richard hugged his daughter by the shoulders. That sounds perfect, sweetheart. Perfect and painfully beautiful, like our story. As they got into the car, each carried with them the weight of the past, but also the hope for the future. The road ahead would be long and at times difficult, but now they would travel it together, as the family they always should have been. The months that followed the meeting with William were of intense transformation for the Anderson family. Richard, Marie, and Olivia dove headfirst into the process of rebuilding their bonds, while dealing with the emotional complexities of their newly discovered past. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, Olivia was in her studio, immersed in her newest creation. The space, once solitary, now frequently received visits from her biological parents. Today, Marie watched fascinated as her daughter worked on the canvas. It's amazing how you capture the light, Marie commented, admiring the vibrant brushstrokes that brought a field of sunflowers to life on the canvas. Olivia smiled, feeling a wave of warmth at her mother's compliment. I think I inherited your eye for colors. I remember you telling me about how each flower in your shop has a unique personality. Marie approached, gently placing her hand on her daughter's shoulder. You know, sometimes it's still hard to believe that we're here, together, that I have the chance to see the incredible woman you've become. Olivia put down her brush, turning to face Marie. I have those moments too. It's like a part of me always knew something was missing, and now I'm complete. The moment was interrupted by the sound of the door opening. Richard entered, carrying bags of food. I hope I'm not interrupting the artistic moment, he joked, placing the bags on a table. Never, Olivia replied with a smile. Actually, we were just talking about how surreal all of this is. Richard joined them, observing the painting in progress. Each day is a new discovery, he reflected. Yesterday, for example, I discovered that Olivia has the same habit I do of humming while working. The three laughed, appreciating these small moments of connection they were discovering. Speaking of discoveries, Olivia began, her voice becoming serious, there's something I want to share with you. She stood up and went to a corner of the studio, pulling out a covered canvas. When she revealed it, Richard and Marie were left speechless. It was a portrait of the family. Not a realistic representation, but an abstract and emotional work. In the center, three intertwined figures, clearly Richard, Marie, and Olivia, surrounded by a whirlwind of vibrant colors. On the edges, darker shadows seemed to want to invade the scene, but were kept at bay by the light emanating from the center. It's beautiful, Marie whispered, tears in her eyes. Richard hugged Olivia, his voice choked. You captured it perfectly, daughter. The struggle, the pain, but also the hope and love. Olivia smiled, moved. This will be the centerpiece of my Rediscovered Roots exhibition. I want to tell our story, not just the pain of the past, but the beauty of what we're building now. The three stood in silence for a moment, absorbing the impact of the work and what it represented. You know, Richard finally spoke, your grandfather, William, called me yesterday. Marie and Olivia turned to him, attentive. He wants to contribute to your exhibition, Olivia. Not financially, but he wants to write a letter, an explanation, a request for forgiveness to be displayed along with your works. Olivia pondered for a moment. What do you think? Would it be too much? Marie took a deep breath before answering. I think it's part of our story. As painful as it is, he is part of all this. And if we're really committed to the idea of healing and reconciliation, then we should include him, Olivia completed, nodding slowly. Richard hugged them both. We don't have to decide now, we have time. The rest of the afternoon was spent in a mixture of deep conversations and light moments. They shared the meal Richard had brought, laughed at old and new stories, and continued to fill in the gaps of 2 lost decades. As the sun set, casting a golden light through the studio, Olivia returned to her easel. Inspired by the conversation and the presence of her parents, she began to sketch a new piece. This one showed a tree, its deep and twisted roots exposed. But instead of being dark and threatening, the roots glowed with vibrant colors, nourishing a strong trunk that rose towards the sky. It's our family tree, she explained to her watching parents. With all its complexities and pains, but also with all its strength and beauty. Marie and Richard watched in silence, marveled at their daughter's ability to transform their collective journey into art. At that moment, surrounded by canvases, that told their story. They felt that they were finally on the right path. The past still cast its shadows, but the future, painted with the colors of love and understanding, seemed brighter than ever. The night of the opening for the Rediscovered Roots exhibition arrived faster than any of them expected. The prestigious gallery in the heart of New York was illuminated and filled with anticipation. Art critics, collectors, and curious onlookers circulated through the space, admiring Olivia's works that told a story of loss, rediscovery, and reconciliation. Olivia, dressed in an elegant navy blue dress, stood before the central piece, the abstract portrait of her newly reunited family. Her eyes scanned the canvas, reliving each brushstroke, each emotion she had poured into it. Richard approached, placing a comforting hand on his daughter's shoulder. "Nervous?" he asked softly. Olivia smiled, turning to her father. "A little. It's strange to expose something so personal to the world, you know? It's like I'm opening my heart for everyone to see." Marie joined them, holding a glass of champagne. "And what a beautiful heart you have, my dear. These works, they speak for all of us." The three stood in silence for a moment, absorbing the magnitude of the event. It wasn't just an art exhibition, but the public celebration of their family journey. The sound of approaching footsteps caught their attention. William Anderson, accompanied by Clara and Robert Sanders, Olivia's adoptive parents, walked towards them. The meeting between all these people who had played crucial roles in Olivia's life created a moment of palpable tension. Clara, who had initially been reluctant to participate, was the first to break the ice. "Olivia, darling," she said, embracing her adopted daughter, "this is simply magnificent. We're so proud of you." Robert nodded in agreement, his eyes misty. "You've transformed your pain into something beautiful, daughter. That's a true gift." Olivia felt her heart expand with the love and support of her adoptive parents. Looking at Richard and Marie, She saw not jealousy or resentment, but gratitude in their eyes. William, who had remained silent until then, finally spoke. His voice trembled slightly. "Olivia, all of you, I know my actions caused immeasurable pain. Seeing this exhibition, seeing how you've transformed this pain into art and love, it's more than I deserve to witness." Richard, surprising everyone, including himself, placed a hand on his father's shoulder. "We're all here, Dad, trying to move forward, trying to heal. Your presence is part of that." Marie agreed, her voice soft but firm. "The past can't be changed, but the future is still in our hands." At that moment, the gallery curator approached, indicating it was time for Olivia to give her opening speech. With one last look at her family, both biological and adoptive, Olivia made her way to the center of the room. "Good evening, everyone," she began, her voice clear and emotional. "Welcome to Rediscovered Roots. This exhibition is more than a collection of paintings. It's a journey, a story of loss, of searching, and finally of reunion." As Olivia spoke, images of her works were projected onto a screen behind her. Each painting told a part of the story: the emptiness of separation, the confusion of lost identity, the joy of reunion, the complexity of forgiveness. "I grew up feeling that a part of me was missing," she continued. "That feeling manifested in my paintings, in solitary flowers, in hazy horizons. But now, having discovered my roots, I find myself painting strong trees, vibrant fields, intertwined families." Her eyes met those of her biological and adoptive parents, all listening intently. "This exhibition is a celebration not just of my personal journey, but of all families who face challenges, separations, and reconciliations. It's a testimony that love, even when tested by time and circumstances, can bloom again." Olivia paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "There's a final piece I'd like to reveal tonight," she announced, gesturing for a curtain to be removed. The newly revealed work left the audience breathless. It was a huge canvas showing a majestic tree. Its roots were deep and complex, some parts dark representing pain and secrets, others bright symbolizing love and forgiveness. The trunk divided into several branches, each representing a family member: Richard, Marie, William, Clara, Robert, and Olivia herself. The tree's leaves and flowers were an explosion of colors and life. "This is our family tree," Olivia explained, her voice choked with emotion. "With all its complexities, pains, and beauties, it's a reminder that our roots, as complicated as they may be, make us who we are, and that there's always room for growth, for healing, for new flowers to bloom." As the audience applauded, moved, Olivia looked at her family. She saw tears in everyone's eyes: Richard and Marie, who could finally publicly embrace the daughter they thought they had lost; Clara and Robert, who saw the girl they raised become an extraordinary woman; and William, whose face showed a mixture of remorse and hope. At that moment, under the gallery lights and surrounded by the art that told their story, the Anderson family felt that a new chapter truly began. A chapter of acceptance, of forgiveness, and above all, of unconditional love. The Rediscovered Roots exhibition was not just an artistic success. It was the milestone of a family that, against all odds, had come together and chosen love above all else. The weeks following the opening of the Rediscovered Roots exhibition were a whirlwind of emotions and changes for the Anderson family. The success of the show not only cemented Olivia's status as a promising artist on the national scene, but also opened doors for deeper conversations and healing within the family. On a Sunday afternoon, the family gathered at Richard's country house, a tranquil retreat on the outskirts of New York. The garden, filled with carefully cultivated flowers, was a silent testament to Marie's love for nature, a love she had rediscovered, along with her memories. Olivia walked through the garden with Clara, her adoptive mother, admiring the roses and lilies that bloomed under the mild sun. "You know, Mom," Olivia began, her voice soft, "I've been thinking a lot about family lately, about how it can have many forms and sizes." Clara smiled, gently squeezing her daughter's hand. "And what have you concluded, dear?" Olivia stopped, turning to face Clara. "That I'm incredibly lucky. I have not just one, but two wonderful mothers, two loving fathers, and a grandfather who, despite his mistakes, is trying to make peace with the past. Tears shimmered in Clara's eyes. Oh, Olivia, you have no idea how good it is to hear that. You know, when we found out about your biological parents, Robert and I were so afraid of losing you. Never, Olivia affirmed with conviction, hugging Clara. You are as much my parents as Richard and Marie. My heart has just grown to accommodate more love. Not far away, Richard and William were talking quietly, sitting on a wooden bench overlooking a small lake. Son, William began, his voice laden with emotion. I know I've said this before, but I need to repeat it. I'm sorry for everything. Seeing you, Helen and Olivia, together, I now realize how much my interference cost all of us. Richard remained silent for a moment, watching the ducks swimming peacefully on the lake. Dad, I won't lie and say it's easy. There are days when anger and resentment still consume me. But then I look at Olivia, see the incredible woman she's become, and think that maybe everything happened as it should have. William looked at his son, surprised. What do you mean? Think about it, Richard explained. If none of this had happened, Olivia wouldn't have been raised by Clara and Robert, who are wonderful people. She wouldn't have developed her art in the same way. And perhaps, just perhaps, we wouldn't have all learned the valuable lessons we've learned about forgiveness and unconditional love. William let out a shaky sigh. Your ability to see the good in all of this, it's admirable, son. Don't be mistaken, Richard replied with a small smile. We're all still in therapy, working on this, but we've chosen to move forward together. On the other side of the garden, Marie and Robert were animatedly discussing gardening, exchanging tips and stories. The scene was a testament to how the two families were intertwining, creating new bonds and strengthening existing ones. When everyone gathered for lunch, served at a large table on the terrace overlooking the garden, the air was filled with an almost palpable positive energy. Olivia, looking around the table at the faces of all those she loved, felt a wave of inspiration. I think I have the theme for my next series of paintings, she announced. All eyes turned to her, curious. I'm going to call it Garden of Second Chances, Olivia explained, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. It will be about how, even after the fiercest storms, new flowers can sprout, about how love, like plants, can be resilient and bloom in unlikely conditions. Marie smiled, moved. That sounds beautiful, dear. I can't wait to see it. Actually, Olivia continued, I was wondering if you'd all like to participate in this project. Participate? How? Richard asked, intrigued. Olivia explained her plan. Each family member would choose a flower or plant that represented their personal journey. She would then create a series of paintings based on these choices, intertwining everyone's stories into one great metaphorical garden. The idea was met with enthusiasm by all. Soon the conversation revolved around flower choices and their meanings, shared memories, and hopes for the future. As the sun began to set, casting a golden light over the garden and the reunited family, Olivia felt a deep sense of peace and belonging. She looked at Richard and Marie, who smiled as they chatted with Clara and Robert. She saw William, her grandfather, laughing at a joke told by her adoptive father. In that moment, Olivia understood that her family, with all its complexity and history, was like the garden around her, diverse, resilient, and continually growing. The roots might be complicated, but the flowers that bloomed were of incomparable beauty. With her heart full of love and gratitude, Olivia made a silent promise to herself. She would continue to nurture these bonds, to cultivate forgiveness and understanding, and to create art that celebrated the beauty of her unique and extraordinary family. The Garden of Second Chances would be more than a series of paintings. It would be a living testament that love, in all its forms, has the power to heal, transform, and flourish, even in the most unlikely terrain. A year passed since the beginning of the Garden of Second Chances project. Olivia's studio, once a solitary space of creation, had transformed into a meeting point for the entire family. The walls were covered with sketches, color studies, and photographs of flowers, each representing a family member and their unique journey. On this sunny spring morning, Olivia was putting the finishing touches on the centerpiece of the series. a monumental canvas that united all the stories in a single lush garden. Her parents, both biological and adoptive, her grandfather William, and even Julia, the young assistant from the flower shop who had become part of the family, were all represented in that work. The sound of familiar footsteps caught Olivia's attention. Richard and Marie entered the studio, followed by Clara and Robert. "Good morning, sweetheart," Marie smiled, hugging her daughter. "Ready for the big day?" Olivia nodded, a mixture of nervousness and excitement on her face. "I can hardly believe the time has come. It feels like it was just yesterday that we had the idea." Richard approached the central canvas, admiring his daughter's work. "It's simply stunning, Olivia. You've captured the essence of each of us perfectly." Clara and Robert, hand in hand, watched with pride. "Our girl," Clara whispered, emotional. "Look at what you've created." At that moment, William entered the studio, carrying a bouquet of diverse flowers. "I thought it appropriate to bring a bit of the real garden to celebrate our metaphorical garden," he explained with a shy smile. Olivia hugged her grandfather, taking the bouquet. "It's perfect, Grandpa, thank you." The morning passed in a whirlwind of activity. The family helped Olivia prepare the final things for the exhibition opening that night. Amidst laughter, shared memories, and some emotional tears, they worked together, further strengthening the bonds they had cultivated over the past year. As the afternoon progressed, Olivia asked for a moment alone in the studio. Standing before the central canvas, she reflected on the incredible journey her family had taken. In the painting, a majestic oak tree, representing William, extended its protective branches over the garden. Its roots, once hidden and tangled, were now exposed, symbolizing the revealed truth and the healing process. Around the oak, flowers of all types and colors bloomed. Vibrant red roses for Richard, symbolizing his enduring love and passion. White lilies for Marie, representing the rebirth of her memories and her purity of spirit. Sunflowers for Clara and Robert, always turned towards the light, nurturing and guiding. And at the center of it all, a group of multicolored irises representing Olivia herself, complex, vibrant, and finally blooming in her true identity. Small hidden details in the painting told additional stories. A hummingbird hovering over a flower, symbolizing Julia and her constant comforting presence. Butterflies representing the transformation they had all undergone. Olivia felt tears of gratitude roll down her cheeks. Every brushstroke on that canvas was a celebration of love, forgiveness, and resilience. The night arrived, and with it, the opening of the Garden of Second Chances exhibition. The gallery was full, not just of art critics and collectors, but of friends, family, and all those who had followed the extraordinary journey of this family. When the time came for Olivia to make her speech, she surprised everyone by calling her entire family to join her. "This exhibition," she began, her voice clear and emotional, "is not just about art. It's about family, about how love can flourish, even in the most unlikely terrain, how it can withstand the fiercest storms and be reborn stronger." Looking at each member of her family, Olivia continued, "Each of you is a unique flower in this garden we've cultivated together. Dad Richard, Mom Marie, you are the deep roots that, even separated for so long, found their way back to each other. Mom Clara, Dad Robert, you are the fertile soil that nourished me and allowed me to grow. Grandpa William, you are the strong trunk that, despite contrary winds, remained firm and now unites us all." William, with tears in his eyes, gently squeezed Olivia's shoulder in a gesture of silent gratitude. "This journey has taught us that family is not defined only by blood, but by love, forgiveness, and the choice to stay together, no matter what." Each painting here tells a part of that story, our story. As Olivia spoke, the gallery visitors watched emotionally. The story of this family, portrayed so beautifully and honestly through art, touched hearts and inspired reflections on forgiveness, love, and second chances. The Garden of Second Chances is more than a series of paintings, Olivia concluded, her voice full of emotion. It's a testament that love, like the most resilient flowers, can sprout even in the most unlikely places, overcome the toughest adversities, and bloom in all its glory.